Hey there, I'm Steve, and welcome to Jamson Entertainment. Welcome to the conversation. Just before I get started, there are many ways you can help. You can like and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. But most importantly, please share this video. Get the word out there so we can talk about all the things that we love. Today on Throwback Thursday, we're looking at The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. In addition to the cast from the last film, this is also starring Brad Dourif, Bernard Hill, Paris House-Drew, Miranda Otto, Carl Urban, David Wenham, and John Noble. Now, before I get into this one, I forgot to mention something extremely crucial in the last one, and shame on me for doing so. In Fellowship of the Ring, it has the best wizard fight ever, and I will fight you on it. So Gandalf is looking for answers about this ring that Bilbo has, and he's trying to figure out if it is the One Ring. And once he finds out, he goes to Saruman, the head of his order, to seek guidance and how they should deal with it. Long story short, Saruman teams up with Sauron, and Gandalf says, "Since when has Saruman abandoned reason for madness?" And thus starts the best wizard fight, period. I'll link it below because it's just freaking awesome. Just like the beginning of this movie is freaking amazing. Now, still kind of talking about Fellowship of the Ring because this picks up at the part where Gandalf exits the film. The Fellowship of the Ring is going through the mines of Moria. It's a dwarven stronghold. It was overrun by orcs. Unfortunately, the dwarves there are dead. But before all of that, while it was still a dwarven mine, and this is how Saruman puts it, the dwarves dug too greedily and too deep, thus awakening a great demon of shadow and flame. But it's a Balrog. Eventually, a Balrog is coming after the Fellowship of the Ring, and you have the famous scene, which launched a bunch of memes of its own, of Gandalf standing between the Balrog and the Fellowship, and the famous, "You shall not pass!" And just when Gandalf thinks he's won, the Balrog comes up with its whip and clips his ankle, tripping him, having him hang on for dear life, and he realizes that the only real chance that his friends have is if he finishes what he started. And that's where we pick up in this one. He falls into the ravine, the deep chasm of the mine, and he starts battling the Balrog with sword and staff. It's absolutely phenomenal and awesome, and it has the best shot in the movie is when they're falling through and they hit this wide open chasm and you see this flame falling down, but you know Gandalf is right on top of him fighting him. It kind of stops there, and then Gandalf comes back later and he finishes the tale of how he defeated the Balrog, and it's epic! Absolutely epic! These movies are epic. I know Star Wars is coming out, the prequels anyway, roughly the same time as these movies. Lord of the Rings was the first real feeling of epic that I've ever gotten from a movie, and it's made me appreciate other epics like Star Wars. Now for the rest of the Fellowship, they all got broken up at the end of the last film. It's Merry and Pippin are on their own. They actually get taken away by orcs. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli all go to rescue Merry and Pippin. Frodo and Sam go on the way to Mount Doom to destroy the ring. There's a ton that happens in the way. They run into Gollum, who tries killing them in their sleep. They wrestle and subdue Gollum, and they get him to do their bidding, but really he's just a guide for them. And Gollum still looks absolutely amazing. Now again, I'm going to say, and I said it probably way too many times in the last review, probably because I'm watching this to review it with a more critical eye, I'm noticing that yes, Gollum still looks phenomenal, but not as phenomenal as I remembered. But it's still really good for being, what is it? I think they came out a year after the other. So it was 2001, 2, and 3. I'm pretty sure. Yes. This one came out in 2002. Quick aside, the Lord of the Rings films, and at first I thought it was the only Lord of the Rings films that did this, but I've learned, I can't think of the films off the top of my head, but there are other films that have done this. All three films were made simultaneously, which I have another point to bring up, but I'll get to it later. I can't get sidetracked too much. That's how they were able to release a film a year, and they did the same thing. Well, here's the other one that they that did this with the Hobbit films. Now back to Gollum. Now it is 22 years later, and the fact that it only kinda looks like he's not there is amazing. I was trying to look it up while I was watching the movie. I couldn't find it. I'm going to find it and I'm going to put it in the description below. I found one behind the scenes of Gollum, but it was a 5-minute clip. The one I remember, because I watched all the behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings, I distinctly remember that the way they got Gollum to be so convincing 22 years ago is that they took a guy that works with makeup, specifically prosthetics, and they taught him how to use a CGI program to generate characters. I'm relatively certain that's why Gollum looks so convincing, of having a completely CGI character interacting with everything in the physical world, because they had Andy Serkis, who is Gollum, do all of that. That's the other level that makes Gollum so convincing. It's not just that they got someone that knows how to work with the physical makeup and prosthetics in the world, and they had him learn a computer program to do it there, but they also had a physical person there. They just weren't guessing. Although, watching the behind the scenes that I did, I've noticed that they actually animated Gollum more than what Andy Serkis was giving them. So it is even more phenomenal than I had thought. Way, way, way ahead of its time. And still ahead of its time comparatively to some movies out there today, unfortunately. That's just talking about Gollum! The other amazing feat in this film, the Kingdom of Rohan. And I'll say again, as I said, I think in the first Hobbit review, that New Zealand is Middle-earth. There's a hill in New Zealand that Peter Jackson and crew had to get permission to disturb, build a set around. There are large portions when watching this time through, I'm realizing are CGI, but their bigger sets are physically there. And they got permission solely on the basis that they put things back the way they found them. And they were like, yes, absolutely, we will do that. I gotta make a trip to New Zealand at some point and see Middle-earth. I want to see Hobbiton. I want to see Rohan. All these other amazing sites that they used in these movies. Now, I guess to summarize the plot, and I thought I gave an oversimplification of it in the last one, I'm gonna give a really oversimplification in this one. I'll do it twice. One, if you've seen Clerks 2, Randall's explanation of how the Lord of the Rings plays out, so you know what I'm talking about there. The second one is kind of what Randall was talking about in Clerks 2. There's a bunch of walking, there's a bunch of fighting, other things happen in between those things. They're still on the way to Mordor. Oh, and there's a whole war breaking out. That's the other thing about this movie, and I looked up to double check myself. J.R.R. Tolkien was a second lieutenant in World War I. I'm not sure how much of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings is a story that was within him that he wanted to get out, and how much of it was a coping mechanism for his time in the war. It's probably a little of A and B there. It definitely comes across in this movie, and it definitely speaks of the horrors of war, even though it is medieval war, just as the ring was a burden in the first film. You really start to see the toll that it's taking on Frodo. And throughout the film, there's various different back and forths between Sam and Frodo about how the ring's affected him. Sam tries to point out to Frodo who he thinks he's acting like, and he's talking about Gollum. And Frodo gets upset and says, "You don't know what you're talking about," and storms off. It's always an A-list cast. First movie, second movie, third movie. A-list cast, completely convincible. Like, you are transported to Middle-earth when you watch these three films, and you are just experiencing the world and the characters within it. Those are my thoughts on The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and live your imagination.